Growing up as the middle child in a family of legal royalty meant learning early that silence was a shield. I will never forget the hush that fell over dinner when my father, Judge Marcus Reed, cleared his throat and leaned forward to deliver his verdict. "Elijah," he said, the single word carrying more weight than any sentence I'd ever heard in his courtroom. "You need direction." My mother, Celeste, the celebrated prosecutor whose courtroom presence could command a jury before she even opened her folder, nodded at his side. Their expectations were pillars surrounding me, and I was trapped in the narrow corridor between them. My eldest brother, Bennett, had always known his path. From his first year of college campus tours, he aspired to medical school. By 16, he'd already interned at the state health department. Every accolade he earned was proudly displayed on the trophy wall in the hallway, a monument to his parents' design. Meanwhile, I hovered at the margins, a quiet son who spoke in binary and soldered circuit boards in the garage long after my family's guests had gone home. Even at 9 years old, I sensed their disappointment before they uttered a word. I remember my mother's voice, low and unadorned by warmth, on the morning I announced that I would rather build computers than memorize case law. She folded her arms, eyebrows raised. "You have a mind for justice, Elijah," she said, as though I had just confessed a crime rather than professed my passion. Their love was conditional on my compliance with a vision I'd never shared. I watched Bennett receive praise for leading the Charity Gala Committee, a role I might have relished in my own way but never dared to pursue. Instead, when I came home with a hand-drawn poster advertising my first homemade coding club after school, my father dismissed it with a single wave of his hand. "That's not a real career, son." Silence became my refuge. While Bennett practiced speeches to address donors, I retreated beneath the staircase, where cardboard boxes held my secret projects. A rudimentary weather station I'd pieced together at 12, lines of code scribbled on scraps of paper. At 14, a prototype for a home automation system powered by a repurposed FPGA board. I barely talked about these inventions, because their lack of nod, their sideways glances of disinterest, taught me that my dreams were invisible. I learned to walk into rooms and blend into the background, to laugh at jokes about my career ambiguity, to nod politely when relatives asked me, "So, what do you do nowadays?" I would manage an expression of earnest uncertainty. "I'm exploring some possibilities." And down the line Bennett went, collecting congratulations while I collected unsent emails to venture capitalists and half-finished lines of code. Still, paradoxically, this enforced quiet forged my resilience. In the solitude of my basement workspace, I discovered a discipline that thrived without applause. Late nights spent debugging stubborn lines of JavaScript made me acutely aware of the power of persistence. Every time a program finally ran without errors, I felt a surge of satisfaction greater than any trophy Bennett had hung on his wall. These moments, when the lights flicked on in my custom control panel, or when my weather station correctly predicted the morning frost, were my victories, privately celebrated in the soft hum of cooling fans. I began to understand that success didn't require a parent's approval, only a willingness to keep trying when no one was watching. But adolescence is as much about identity as invention, and the silence I wore like armor sometimes felt like chains. At family gatherings, I watched Bennett take the stage with ease, and I found myself envying not only his success but the certainty of his path. When I attended mock trial competitions in high school, my mother's domain, her comfort zone, I excelled at research and argumentation, but the moment I stood to speak, my voice trembled. Each sentence felt like an act of defiance against the person I was expected to become, and in that tension I realized that no amount of persuasion could reforge my true self. I wanted to shape code, not court cases, to architect software, not legal briefs. The defining moment came on the evening of my high school graduation. The ceremony hall buzzed with anticipation as my fellow graduates accepted diplomas with practiced smiles. My parents sat in the front row, beaming as Bennett's classmates received accolades and promised to carry on the family legacy. When my name echoed over the loudspeaker, I walked the stage with a calm resolve. In my gown pocket, I carried the application to the State University's computer science program, and I was prepared to declare, in the face of every expectant gaze, that I would pursue a path uncharted by Reed tradition. As I shook hands with the principal and glimpsed my parents' expressions, first confusion, then a flicker of something like wonder, I felt the weight of their expectations slip away. I was no longer the silent observer under their thumb. I was Elijah Reed, builder of my own future. And so, under their roof and beneath their gaze, I learned the greatest lesson they never intended to teach me, that the truest measure of success is not how loudly the world applauds, but how faithfully you follow the quiet call of your own ambitions. Every time I walked down the hallway, my gaze was drawn to the trophy wall, a gleaming array of glass awards, engraved plaques, and framed certificates celebrating Bennett's every accomplishment. The polished wood reflected the overhead lights, and I could see my own shadow stretching past those trophies, the boxes of my projects hidden beneath the stairs receding into darkness. At 13, I had taught myself to code. At 16, I built an event planning software for our high school. At 19, I pitched Medscope to a panel of angel investors, but none of that ever made it onto display. My achievements were packed away in cardboard cartons, each labeled with pencil dates and project names, stacked in the basement where no one checked. I remember the afternoon I first noticed the disparity. I'd returned from a regional coding competition with a bronze medal taped into my backpack pocket. The judges had commended my algorithm's efficiency and awarded me for innovative problem solving. My heart swelled with pride as I approached the trophy wall, expecting to see a new spot for my medal. Instead, I found room had been carved out only for Bennett's latest biology fair first place. "Nice work, Elijah," my father said over dinner, his tone polite but clipped. "But you know medicine is a more stable profession." He glanced at Bennett's plaque as though seeking reinforcement. I swallowed my excitement and nodded, tucking my medal into my pocket. Stability, to them, equaled safety, not passion. Behind those perceptions lay the storage box where I kept the real proof of my ambition. Beneath the staircase, dust motes danced in the faint beam of the single bare bulb, illuminating blueprints, circuit boards, and spiral-bound notebooks filled with code snippets. There was the first iteration of my event planner, lines of JavaScript covered in coffee stains, and the prototype of a remote health monitoring device I built at 17. I'd shipped that prototype to a small clinic in the Midwest, hoping to test real-world feedback, but the only response I received was a form letter of thanks. The clinic director loved the idea but lacked the budget. That letter now sat inside the box, a reminder that my work mattered, even if no one in my own family realized it. I spent countless evenings down there, headphones on, tuning circuitry, rewriting functions, dreaming of a day when my projects would sit alongside Bennett's trophies. Sometimes I imagined replacing one of his plaques with my own, Elijah Reed, Medscope founder, Healthcare Innovation Award, and watching my parents' expressions shift from polite approval to genuine awe. But I never acted on that fantasy. Instead, I returned each prototype and scrap of code to its box, sealed it with packing tape, and let the clasp snap shut, tucking the lid beneath a larger box of old files. Silence became my fortress, the box my sanctuary. When I turned 18 and launched Medscope in secret, I carried that box with me to college. My roommate thought it was full of textbooks. In truth, it held the building blocks of my startup. Market research notes, early wireframes, and a rudimentary database of healthcare providers. I rarely opened it on campus, preferring to work in the computer lab where no one knew my last name. There, I coded into the early morning hours, fueled by ramen and determination. I watched as my user base grew, metrics climbed, and pilot programs launched, successes that filled my heart more than any parental praise ever could. Yet I kept that box locked in my dorm closet, an artifact of my hidden life. My parents finally noticed something when I invited them to a demo during a holiday visit. I set up my laptop at the dining table, opened Medscope's dashboard, and walked them through encrypted messaging threads between doctors and patients. I showed statistics, reduced response times, improved patient satisfaction, lower readmission rates. My mother's eyes softened as she leaned forward. "This is impressive," she murmured, tracing the graphs with her finger. My father straightened his tie and nodded. For a moment, I saw the pride I'd craved reflected back at me. Then my mother's gaze lifted to the trophy wall, where Bennett's newest accolade gleamed. "Why wasn't this on the wall?" she asked. The question felt like a verdict reversed. That evening, after the guests dispersed, my mother found me in the basement, the single bulb still glowing. She fingered the dusty boxes. "Show me everything," she said. For the first time, I pulled out each notebook, prototype, and scrappy letter, explaining the evolution of every project. She listened without interrupting, nodding at key moments, asking questions about coding languages and user interface design. My father joined us, arms crossed but attentive. They stayed until the bulb flickered, illuminating my buried dreams in pale light. When I finally closed the last notebook, my mother brushed the dust from its cover and said, "We should put all of this on that wall." I felt a swell of validation so powerful it knocked the breath from my lungs. The next morning, I helped them clear a section of the hall. We hung framed screenshots of my apps, mounted prototypes in shadow boxes, and engraved a new plaque, Elijah Reed, innovator and founder of Medscope. My brother peered around the corner, blinking at the new additions. In that moment, the trophy wall transformed from a monument to Bennett alone into a testament to our family's collective potential. And the storage box, once a symbol of what I'd hidden, became an artifact of the journey that brought me from silence to recognition. Under their roof and once under their thumb, I had carved out my place, and at last, my work shone in plain view. I met Nora during my junior year of college at a hackathon held in the cavernous student center, where fluorescent lights hummed overhead and clusters of programmers hunched over laptops. She was the only person who challenged my code with intelligent questions instead of polite nods. Her mind moved like quicksilver. She'd volley logic puzzles at me between lines of Python, and I found myself drawn to her spark. By dawn, we had not only debugged my event planning algorithm, but also sketched out the seed of Medscope on a napkin stained with half-drunk coffee. In that moment, I realized two things. First, that someone finally understood why I chose the soft glow of a monitor over the glare of courtroom spotlights. And second, that I was falling in love. Our early days were a whirlwind of late-night coding sessions and shared takeout boxes scattered across my dorm room floor. While Bennett pored over medical textbooks back home, Nora and I collaborated on data models and user interfaces, fueled by determination and cheap caffeine. We built prototypes on borrowed servers, sending MVP links to friends for testing. When I hesitated, fearing my parents' judgment, she refused to let doubt derail us. "If your vision only matters to you, you're building in a vacuum," she said, her eyes alight. "Let's build something that matters to others." Under her encouragement, I pitched Medscope to professors, local clinics, and any potential mentor who would listen. Though most responded with polite no's, each rejection taught us to refine features, tighten security, and optimize performance. By senior year, we'd moved into a cramped one-bedroom apartment just off campus, its walls lined with whiteboards filled with flowcharts and feature lists. The place smelled perpetually of takeout containers and whiteboard markers. My parents never visited. Back home, I told them I was between jobs. I didn't correct them when my father chuckled over dinner with his legal colleagues that I'd probably settle into something stable. Stability, to me, meant lack of impact. Drawing from my mother's courtroom tenacity and my father's demand for precision, I insisted that Medscope adhere to the highest standards of data privacy and user experience. Nora matched my drive, waking me at 6 a.m. to optimize server scripts before we headed to our respective classes, hers in data science, mine in software engineering. When graduation arrived, our small team of 3 interns and 1 mentor launched a pilot at a regional clinic, enabling doctors to message patients securely about follow-up appointments and prescription questions. Within weeks, error rates dropped, patient satisfaction spiked, and clinicians praised the platform's simplicity. I sat in silence at our celebratory dinner, overwhelmed by pride but afraid to share the news at home. The next morning, my phone buzzed with congratulatory emails from our mentor network. I replayed those notifications in my mind, savoring them like a private treasure, while my parents exchanged routines about Bennett's residency applications and upcoming interviews. In the months that followed, Nora and I poured every dollar of our limited savings back into Medscope. We hired our first full-time developer and a UX designer, working from a tiny co-working space that smelled of stale coffee and ambition. While Bennett married his fiancée in a ceremony that made headlines in local society pages, I stayed behind a closed laptop, refining encryption protocols and negotiating our seed investment. My parents received only an email invitation to the ceremony, an invitation they declined without explanation. I understood their distance as a mixture of misunderstanding and the unspoken belief that I was still exploring options. So I continued to build. My relationship with Nora deepened beyond code. We balanced whiteboard sessions with lazy Sunday brunches, and she celebrated my small victories with handwritten notes tucked into my laptop bag. On evenings when endless bug fixes threatened to overwhelm me, She reminded me why we started this venture: to improve patient care through seamless communication. "You're not building software," she said once as we watched the city skyline from our apartment roof. "You're building trust." Those words stitched themselves into my resolve, cementing our partnership not only as co-founders but as life partners. Yet, despite our progress, doubt still gnawed at me. I longed to tell my parents the full story, to watch their faces when they saw how Medscope was changing lives. But I feared their expectations would warp my success into another benchmark of family pride, rather than a testament to our shared vision. Then came the day we signed a 7-figure contract with a private hospital network for enterprise deployment. Nora cried tears of relief. I sat speechless, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I wanted to celebrate with my parents, to see them beam with approval. Instead, I sent a polite email summarizing the news. The reply: "Congratulations on your brother's match to the cardiology fellowship." That night, after our small champagne toast, Nora took my hand. "They'll come around," she said. "But your journey isn't theirs to define." Her confidence steadied me. In that moment, I realized that our mission, even when misunderstood, was worth every silent sacrifice. I understood that family expectations would shift only when the impact of our work became undeniable. So Nora and I continued building, day by day, line by line, knowing that one day our voices would echo louder than any doubt, and that when they did, we would be ready to speak on behalf of every patient and provider who relied on our platform. 3 years into building Medscope, Nora and I had settled into a rhythm of controlled chaos. Our tiny office buzzed with the steady click of keyboards as our first full-time developers tackled feature requests and squashed bugs. Late one afternoon, I sat at my desk, reviewing the latest user metrics, when my phone vibrated with an email notification from Horizon Systems, a private hospital network I'd assumed was far too large to notice a small startup like ours. My heart caught in my throat as I opened the message. They wanted to schedule a call to discuss potential collaboration and enterprise licensing. I replayed the words over and over, wary that I had misread something. Horizon was a titan in our industry, a name whispered in the hushed hallways of healthcare conferences. They had piloted our platform in 3 of their clinics, but I had expected our relationship to end with polite feedback and perhaps a letter of recommendation. Instead, they were proposing a 7-figure licensing deal. Sweat beaded at my temples as I stared at the numbers, more zeros than I had ever imagined seeing in my bank account. My vision for Medscope had always been modest: solve real problems, one clinic at a time. Yet here was an offer that promised to scale our impact exponentially. I tapped out a reply, voice unsteady as I thanked them, and proposed times for a call. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I wondered whether to share this news with my parents. For years, I'd kept the specifics of my work hidden, letting them believe I was still finding my way, while Nora and I quietly steered Medscope toward success. I hesitated, then set the thought aside. I needed to focus. On the video call the next morning, I watched the Horizon executives settle into their chairs behind glossy nameplates. They spoke with measured precision, commending our secure messaging features and citing the 40% reduction in patient readmission rates during the pilot. When they outlined the licensing fee, an upfront payment that would cover our operating costs for the next 2 years, I felt both exhilaration and dread. Exhilaration because our years of relentless work were finally bearing fruit. Dread because I realized how little my family truly understood what I had built. After the call ended, I sat back, moments passing before reality settled in. To accept Horizon's offer would mean giving up significant control over Medscope's roadmap. They wanted us to dedicate half our engineering team to custom integrations for their proprietary systems, and they requested a seat on our board of directors. These demands risked slowing our broader vision to expand Medscope into new markets and develop AI-driven triage features. I closed my eyes and imagined surrendering our independence in exchange for growth. I saw my parents' faces, glimpsing their surprise when the numbers hit their ears. Would they finally see me as successful? Or would their questions inevitably shift to, "Have you sold out?" That evening, I found Nora in our apartment kitchen, her laptop open to a draft budget document. I slid into the chair across from her, voice tight. "They want $10 million for a 5-year license," I said. Her eyes widened, then softened as she reached for my hand. "That's incredible," she whispered. "But what do they want in return?" We pored over the contract terms late into the night, tracking every byline and checkbox. The deal was lucrative, but the equity and governance strings weighed heavily. Horizon wanted half our company's board seats, a veto on any new partnerships, and exclusive rights to health network deployments in the Eastern region. Over the next week, we negotiated. We insisted on reducing their board representation to a single seat, preserving our ability to steer product direction. We pushed back on exclusivity clauses, arguing that limiting our market would stifle growth. As co-founders, Nora and I found our resolve tested. We debated heatedly over dilution percentages and long-term vision. Finally, we reached a middle ground. Horizon would receive $8 million, 2 board seats, and non-exclusive licensing rights, allowing us to pursue other networks and international trials. When we signed the term sheet, I felt a surge of triumph tempered by relief. I closed my laptop with a soft click and leaned back, imagining the look on my parents' faces when I told them. My stomach fluttered with both excitement and anxiety. I rehearsed a simple announcement. Mom, Dad, I have news. Medscope just closed a major enterprise deal with Horizon Systems. But the next morning, as I walked through our front door, I faltered at the sight of my father in his study, reviewing case files, and my mother arranging flowers in the living room. My announcement felt sudden, too big for the quiet morning light. Instead, I settled at the kitchen table and brewed coffee. The aroma filled the space as I slid the signed agreement across to Nora. She grinned, eyes shining. "We did it," she said. I nodded, stirring sugar into my mug. I realized I had to tell my parents soon, but first I needed the right moment, one where their world wasn't occupied by courtroom strategies or gala planning. That evening, after dinner, I cleared my throat. My parents paused mid-conversation about Bennett's residency interviews. I slid a printed copy of the agreement across the table. "I have something to share," I began. Their eyes lifted, curious. I watched my mother's gaze drift over the document, linger on the Horizon logo, then return to my face. My father folded the page, brow furrowing. "Medscope?" he asked. I nodded, voice sure. "We've signed a multi-million-dollar licensing deal." For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then my mother exhaled, a smile blooming. "Elijah," she said, voice proud, "tell us everything." As I recounted the negotiations, the late nights, and the future we envisioned, I saw their skepticism melt away, replaced by genuine wonder. My father leaned forward, asking about integration timelines. My mother's eyes sparkled as she grasped the potential impact on patient care. In that moment, I understood that the deal they never knew about had become the proof they finally needed, that under their roof and beneath their expectations, I had built something that truly mattered. The day Horizon Systems called, everything changed. I was sitting at my desk in the narrow co-working space Nora and I had outgrown months ago, squinting at lines of code that refused to compile, when my phone buzzed with a notification that made my heart skip. The email header read simply, Horizon Systems Inquiry, and the body contained just a few sentences. They wanted to discuss purchasing Medscope for $180 million. In that moment, the din of clacking keys and hushed conversations around me blurred into white noise. I reread the offer, each digit of that staggering sum etching itself into my mind, and felt an electric surge of possibility. I could almost taste the freedom the money promised, a chance to clear debts, to hire a deeper bench of engineers, to explore features I'd shelved for lack of resources. Yet beneath the swirl of excitement, a knot of hesitation tightened in my chest. Nora found me hunched over my laptop, eyes wide and unblinking, as the cursor on the draft reply blinked back at me. "They want to buy us out," I whispered, voice barely audible in the hushed office. She leaned in, her dark hair slipping over one shoulder, and read the email over my shoulder. Her brow furrowed, then lifted in recognition of what this meant, an exit before the real mission was complete. We talked in low tones as colleagues passed our table without noticing. 17 months of blood and code, of midnight debugging sessions and endless pitches, distilled into a single phone call. Could we really hand over the reins when our vision for Medscope's future still burned bright? By the time the scheduled conference call flickered onto my screen, I had rehearsed my responses a dozen times. The Horizon executives appeared in crisp video frames, suits and nameplates and practiced smiles. They opened by praising Medscope's impact. How it had slashed communication errors in their pilot clinics, how patients rated it higher than any prior messaging tool, how administrators lauded our intuitive interface. Then they laid out the acquisition terms. $180 million, payable upon closing, the lead negotiator said, voice steady and confident. We believe this valuation reflects Medscope's proven performance and horizon-wide potential. We'd like to integrate your technology into our entire network immediately. I felt heat rush to my face as I nodded, forcing a measured tone. Thank you, I said, but Nora and I have more work to do. We envision expanding Medscope's capabilities with AI-driven triage and multilingual support. We'd like to retain full control of development to fulfill that vision. A flicker of surprise crossed the executive's face. We can adjust, he replied after a beat. What would it take to keep you both on board? What equity stake and governance structure would satisfy you? Nora and I exchanged glances, silent communication tempered by adrenaline. We spent the next hour outlining our priorities, funding to accelerate R&D, a minority investment rather than full acquisition, and a commitment to maintain our existing leadership team. By the end of the call, Horizon agreed to return with adjusted terms. When the email arrived 2 weeks later, I opened it with both anticipation and dread. They offered $120 million plus an ongoing equity investment vesting over 5 years, with a minority board seat for each of us and guarantees of development autonomy. The revised deal struck a balance between financial security and creative control, enough runway to build the AI features we dreamed of, enough capital to expand internationally, enough credibility to attract top-tier talent. I stared at the screen, the numbers glowing like beacons of possibility. Yet I hesitated to share the news. I still hadn't told my family what I did for a living. My parents thought I was between jobs, and Bennett believed I was working at some nondescript tech firm. When Bennett called me from home to ask for advice on his engagement dinner, how to thank his fiancée's family, whether to give a speech, I realized the moment had come. His excitement crackled through the phone as he rattled off menu ideas and seating charts. I sat at my kitchen table, untouched coffee growing cold beside me, and drafted a message, "Come early tonight. I have something to show you." My fingers hovered over the send button for a heartbeat, then struck the key and sent the invite. My heart thundered as I imagined their faces when they saw the contract and the horizon of opportunity it represented. That evening, I arrived at the Bluebird-lit restaurant before anyone else, the elegant chandeliers casting soft halos over linen-draped tables. I carried the folded agreement in a slender leather portfolio, my palm sweating against its smooth surface. When Bennett and Alina arrived, he in a tailored suit, she radiant in emerald green, I greeted them with a steady smile. My parents emerged moments later, celestials clicking against polished stone, Marcus straight-backed and inquisitive. As we settled into our booth, I felt the all-too-familiar tug of nerves. I cleared my throat and produced the portfolio. "Before we toast tonight," I said, voice calm but firm, "there's something I'd like you all to see." One by one, I passed the agreement around the table, explaining how Horizon Systems had first offered to buy Medscope outright, how Nora and I had negotiated a minority investment deal instead, and how the terms aligned with our future vision. I saw my father's brows knit in thought as he reviewed the valuation and board structure. My mother's eyes softened as she traced the clauses guaranteeing product autonomy. Bennett, visibly stunned, set down his champagne flute. "I had no idea," he murmured. "You built all of this?" A ripple of realization passed over the table as the magnitude of my work sank in. I watched their expressions shift from polite curiosity to genuine pride. In that moment, I understood that I had not only secured Medscope's future, but also finally claimed my place under our family's roof, not as the overlooked middle child, but as an innovator whose voice echoed beyond their expectations. Bluebird felt impossibly grand that evening, the polished marble floors reflecting the glow of crystal chandeliers and the muted hum of conversation. When I stepped through the entrance, tailored in a crisp suit and tie, I felt as though I were navigating a world not my own. My family's table was already set beneath a vaulted alcove at the far end, my parents at the head, Bennett beside our mother, and his fiancée, Alina Hart, beside him. Alina, with her confident smile and elegant poise, wore a sapphire gown that caught the light with every measured breath. I smoothed my lapels and offered a polite nod to the maitre d', refusing to let my nerves betray me. My mother greeted me with her customary smile, all warmth on the surface and steel beneath. She introduced me to the guests seated behind Bennett, colleagues of Alina's from Horizon Systems, while I kept my focus on the table's centerpiece, a low arrangement of white orchids and flickering candles. I recalled the last few weeks of frantic negotiations, the back and forth with Horizon's legal team, and the way Alina had reached out to broker our final terms. None of that mattered now. I was Elijah Reed, younger brother, sitting at the far end of the table like a visiting in-law. I forced myself to breathe steadily as the waitress poured water into my glass. The first course arrived with hushed fanfare. A delicate salad of frisee and shaved fennel, ribbons of aged Parmesan glinting under the candlelight. Conversation spun around me, Bennett's residency plans, Alina's new office, small talk I recognized from years of family gatherings. My parents exchanged knowing smiles when someone praised Bennett's accomplishments, and I felt the familiar tug of old expectations. I sipped water and studied the menu, wondering if Alina even knew who I really was. By the second course, seared scallops on a bed of pea puree, my anxiety tightened into a knot so fierce it made my jaw ache. Then Alina's voice cut through the clinking of cutlery. "Elijah, is that seat taken?" My head snapped up. She stood and moved to the chair beside me, brushing strands of hair behind her ear. "I'm sorry," she said to my parents and Bennett, "but I need to talk to my partner." The hush that felt as thick as fog. I didn't know what to say. I only understood that I was no longer invisible. She lowered her voice, leaning close enough that I could feel the warmth of her perfume. "You're Elijah Reed, right?" she asked, eyes bright. "The founder of Medscope?" My pulse fluttered as the rest of the table watched. I nodded, voice catching. "Yes." A tension crackled through the air as her colleagues exchanged glances, and Bennett's face went pale. My mother's practiced smile faltered, and my father set down his napkin. I didn't know," my mother whispered. Alina turned to them, speaking with a polite firmness that sliced through years of unspoken assumptions. "I've been negotiating with Medscope for months. Your son's platform reduced our clinic's error rates by 40% in our pilot program." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. A brittle silence followed. I felt every pair of eyes on me, a mixture of disbelief, curiosity, and something else I couldn't name. My chest tightened, but I met their gazes squarely. Bennett cleared his throat. "But you said he was still exploring what he wanted to be," he stammered, voice unsteady. My mother turned to him, lips pressed into a thin line. "I must have misunderstood," she said, as though trying to reconcile her image of me with this revelation. My father, who so rarely showed surprise, leaned forward. "Elijah," he said, tone measured, "we always assumed you were taking time before deciding on a career." I swallowed, tasting metal at the back of my throat. "I didn't correct you," I admitted. "I wanted to let Medscope grow on its own. I wasn't ready for the spotlight." My words felt both cautious and liberating. I was no longer the silent observer. Alina squeezed my hand under the table, her support a quiet anchor. The third course arrived, roast chicken with artichokes and lemon gremolata, but no one touched their food. My parents studied me as though seeing me for the first time. The assembled guests shifted awkwardly, unsure how to resume the conversation. I set down my fork and straightened in my chair, voice calm but steady. "I built Medscope to improve patient care," I said, "not to fulfill anyone's expectations but my own. I'm proud of what Nora and I have created." The words rang true in the hush. My father exhaled, tension leaving his shoulders. My mother placed her hand over mine and gave a small smile, genuine, warm, free of past disappointment. Bennett reached across the table and ruffled my hair, a sheepish grin on his face. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly, loud enough for only me to hear. The guests exchanged relieved smiles, and Alina offered a gentle nod. When dessert arrived, a trio of dark chocolate pots de creme, the mood had shifted. Conversation picked up in earnest, questions about Medscope's future, inquiries into potential collaborations between Horizon and our team. For the first time, I felt seated at the head of the table I'd always been relegated to the edge of, welcomed into a circle that recognized my worth. The orchid centerpiece seemed to glow with new meaning, not a barrier between us and the rest of the world, but a shared bloom signaling that. Finally, everyone had seen the work I carried beneath their roof and beneath their expectations. The moment Alina spoke my name at the engagement dinner, the room went still, as though time had paused mid-breath. Now, days later, the echoes of that moment rippled through every corner of my life. I woke the morning after the dinner to a phone buzzing with messages, some from Horizon colleagues offering congratulations, others from friends who had overheard Alina's revelation. Each ping felt like a tiny earthquake, shaking the foundations of the life I'd quietly built. I lay in bed, sunlight slipping through the blinds, and stared at the ceiling, mind racing over every whispered snippet, every sideways glance I'd felt at dinner. My parents, for all their careful composure that night, were likely talking behind closed doors. Bennett would be fielding calls from well-meaning relatives. And me? I was the epicenter of something I hadn't expected, like a secret suddenly unleashed. I slipped into my routines. A black coffee at sunrise, 10 minutes of checking metrics on my phone, then the subway ride to our co-working space. But the daily grind felt different now. At the station, commuters whispered in hushed tones as I passed. I caught fragments. That Medscope guy. Reed's brother. $1 million deal. Their curiosity felt invasive, as if my parents' disappointment had been replaced by public fascination. At the office, Nora greeted me with a cautious smile. "Rough morning?" she asked, noticing the shadows under my eyes. I nodded, pulling off my jacket. It's like everyone knows, but no one's asking me directly. Our first task was a product review with our development team. We sat around a reclaimed barnwood table, laptops open and coffee cups steaming. I expected questions about UI tweaks or bug fixes, but the team's eyes flicked toward me with an almost embarrassed excitement. Elijah, one of our junior engineers, blurted out, "Congrats on the Horizon board seat." "That's huge." Silence followed. I cleared my throat. "Thanks," I said, voice measured. "Let's dive into sprint priorities." We moved on, but the energy in the room had shifted, respect interlaced with awe. It was the first time I felt fully seen as a founder rather than just Bennett's brother dabbling in tech. Later, I met my parents for brunch at the Drake. A neutral zone where, until recently, I'd been content to sip orange juice while Bennett discussed pathology residencies. My mother arrived first, wearing a tailored coat that somehow made her look both formidable and tentative. My father followed, an unreadable expression on his face. We ordered coffee and omelets, and for a long moment no one spoke. Eventually, my mother folded her napkin. "Your dinner announcement. It surprised us," she began. I braced myself, expecting critique. "Instead," she continued, "I'm sorry we never asked what you were working on. We assumed you were taking time before deciding on your career." My chest loosened as I realized her words carried regret, not reproach. My father sipped his coffee before adding, "We're proud of you, Elijah. We just didn't understand the magnitude of your work." His tone lacked his usual judicial detachment. It was warm, vulnerable. I told them about the Horizon negotiations, the terms we'd secured to preserve Medscope's autonomy, and the plans for new AI-driven triage features. My mother's eyes lit up as she envisioned the impact on patient care. My father asked about governance and board responsibilities. It was the first conversation we'd had where our roles felt equal, where I was the expert and they were listening to learn. After brunch, I walked home beneath blossoming trees, the city a hum around me. The air carried snippets of spring, the scent of fresh mulch, the distant laughter of children in a nearby park. For years, I'd felt like an outsider in my own family, my work relegated to the shadows. Now, each whisper and sideways glance that once felt like judgment instead felt like quiet admiration. I realized that recognition, once won, changes everything. That evening, Bennett dropped by our apartment unannounced. He leaned against the doorway, hands in pockets, nervous energy emanating from him. "Hey," he said, voice soft. "Sorry if I've been a ghost since the dinner. Family stuff, you know." I waved him in and led him to the couch. Nora was in the next room, reviewing user feedback reports. I turned back to Bennett. "No worries. How are you?" He sighed. "Honestly, I feel like I've been living in your shadow my whole life, and suddenly everyone's talking about you. It's weird." I offered him a reassuring smile. "You're no shadow, Bennett. You've always been the one they wanted to celebrate. Now they're finally celebrating me too." He chuckled, shaking his head. "I still don't know how you did it." I patted the cushion beside me. "Sit. I'll show you our pitch deck." As we huddled over my laptop, explaining user flows and market analysis, I felt a connection rekindling between us. For so long, we'd been defined only by our oldest roles, he the golden child, I the overlooked tinkerer. Now, as we spoke the same language of data and growth, I saw in his eyes a genuine pride that went beyond sibling duty. Later, I returned to the office for a late-night strategy session with Nora. The whiteboard was blank, awaiting our next set of plans: multilingual support, an AI chat assistant, expanded network trials. The aftershocks of that dinner lingered in every text message and whispered comment, but I harnessed them as fuel. I picked up a marker and sketched our roadmap, each initiative a testament to the trust Horizon and, finally, my family had placed in me. In that moment, beneath the glow of whiteboard markers and the hum of our server, I realized that whispers and aftershocks didn't just change how others saw me, they reshaped how I saw myself. And from that new vantage point, there was nothing I couldn't build. The sunlight slanted through the high windows of the Drake's breakfast room, casting long, golden rectangles across crisp white tablecloths and polished silverware. I arrived first, as planned, smoothing the fabric of my shirt and running a hand through my hair. The quiet hum of clinking coffee cups and hushed conversation felt a world away from the tension that had dominated our last family dinner. Today, we would speak on neutral ground, away from crystal chandeliers and formal place settings, a chance for real conversation. My mother drifted through the entrance a few minutes later, her posture measured, but her eyes warm as she greeted me with a soft smile. She wore a tailored blouse in pale blue, the color bringing out flecks of green in her eyes. My father arrived just as the maitre d' led us to his semicircular booth overlooking the street. He nodded at my mother, then offered me a tight-lipped smile. "Good morning," he said, voice steady. I slid into the seat opposite them, feeling the weight of their gaze, but also the relief that we were here together, outside the confines of home. We exchanged pleasantries, comments about the weather, the soft buzz of spring in the air, while the waiter poured steaming cups of coffee. My mother stirred in a hint of cream and sighed. "Elijah," she began, the single word charged with the gravity of unspoken apologies. "We wanted to understand more about Medscope, how it works, what your vision is." My heart swelled. I'd rehearsed this moment, but their genuine curiosity surprised me. I cleared my throat and leaned forward, eager to bridge the gap that had stretched between us for years. "It's built on secure, encrypted messaging," I explained, tracing a finger along the menu as though outlining a flowchart. Doctors and patients communicate through an app that routes messages directly to care teams. It integrates with electronic health records so no information gets lost, and it tracks response times to ensure no patient falls through the cracks. Our pilot clinics reported a 40% drop in readmissions because patients received timely follow-up. My parents nodded, absorbing each detail. The waiter returned to take our orders, omelets for my father, avocado toast for my mother. While I continued, undeterred. "But it's more than messaging," I said, warmth building in my chest as I described the AI-driven features we plan to roll out. "We're training a triage assistant to interpret patient-reported symptoms and recommend pre-appointment resources. It flags urgent cases and routes them to on-call nurses. We're also working on multilingual support so non-English-speaking patients can communicate without barriers." My mother's eyes lit up as she imagined the impact, and my father folded his hands, thoughtful. It felt like they were finally seeing the years of late nights and basement coding in vivid color. I paused only when the waiter placed our food before us, a perfectly fluffy omelet streaked with chives and a thick slice of sourdough under a mound of smashed avocado. I took a bite to steady myself, savoring the tang of feta and the bright hint of lemon zest. My parents followed suit, sampling their dishes as though tasting new terrain. When my mother spoke again, her voice was soft. "I wish we had asked you about this sooner," she said, eyes on her plate. "We assumed you were exploring different career paths, but never realized how far you'd taken Medscope." Guilt washed over me for the years we'd lost to assumptions. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you," I replied, "but I wanted to prove it to myself first." Her hand covered mine across the table, and the simple gesture filled me with a deep sense of reconciliation. My father pushed back his chair slightly, folding and refolding his napkin. "Tell me about the decision to negotiate a minority investment rather than sell outright," he said. "That was a bold move." I explained how Horizon Systems had initially offered a full acquisition, complete buyout at $180 million, only to be steered toward a structure that preserved our autonomy. "We valued our mission over a quick exit," I said. "We wanted capital to grow, but not at the expense of our vision." He nodded slowly, approval softening his features. "You've shown remarkable foresight," he admitted, tone sincere. As the brunch plates cleared, we moved from technical specifics to bigger picture implications. I spoke about the potential to expand into telehealth, to leverage machine learning for predictive analytics, and to partner with global health organizations. My parents listened with an engagement I'd never seen before, leaning in, asking follow-up questions, grappling with ideas that once would have sounded foreign. I realized we weren't just eating brunch together. We were charting a course for a new chapter of understanding and mutual respect. When coffee cups ran dry and the waiter offered dessert, my mother refused with a smile. "I think we've had enough sweetness," she said. My father placed a hand on mine. "Elijah," he said quietly, "we're proud of you. Not for the numbers or the press, but for your commitment to improving care." His words resonated more than any conference keynote or industry accolade. I felt a lump in my throat as I nodded, voice catching. "Thank you," I said. "Your support means everything." We rose from the booth as one, lingering at the edge of the room as sunlight pooled at our feet. Walking back out onto the street, the world felt both familiar and new. My mother looped her arm through mine, and my father placed a firm hand on my shoulder. We fell into step together, the city's rhythm matching our own. For years, I'd worked beneath the silence of unspoken expectations. Today, at a simple brunch table, our whispered truths and shared dreams had built a bridge where walls once stood. And as we crossed that bridge, I knew the aftershocks of our conversation would ripple far beyond our family. To every clinic, every patient, every life that Medscope would touch. When Alina's text arrived on my phone the morning after the brunch summit, I was halfway through drafting a feature spec for Medscope's AI triage assistant. Her message was succinct: "Meet me at the cafe on 5th, 10 a.m. sharp." My heart skipped. After the dinner and the brunch, I had assumed our conversation had closed the chapter on family revelations, but this felt different. An intentional reach across the chasm that had long separated me from my family's inner circle. I replied, "On my way," and packed my laptop into its case, excitement and curiosity fluttering in my chest. The cafe on 5th was a quiet spot known for artisanal espresso and minimalist decor, whitewashed walls, hanging ferns, and a soundtrack of lo-fi beats. Alina sat at a corner table, her posture relaxed but her expression earnest. She waved as I approached, and I slid into the seat opposite her. She set a steaming latte before me and took a slow sip before speaking. "I wanted to apologize again for the dinner," she said. I steady. "I shouldn't have put you on the spot publicly." I shook my head. "It needed to happen," I replied. "My parents had no idea what I'd built." She nodded. "I know, but I also want to congratulate you properly and propose something." My curiosity piqued. I leaned forward. "Go on." She reached into her bag and pulled out a tablet, flipping it open to a slide deck titled Horizon, Medscope Integration. "I've spent the past week talking with my team," she explained. "We believe Medscope's core platform is transformative, but there's untapped potential in applying your system to emerging markets, places where healthcare communication is fragmented by language barriers and low infrastructure. Horizon wants to invest, but I want to personally beta test Medscope in my former hospital network in Eastern Europe. I'm offering to be your liaison." I blinked. The idea of partnering directly with Alina, who occupied one of Horizon's most influential leadership roles, felt both thrilling and daunting. "You'd advocate for us?" I asked, not just as Bennett's fiancé or my mother's friend, but as an ally who understands the product? She smiled. "Exactly. I've seen Horizon's internal teams struggle with localized deployments. Your platform's modular architecture could let us spin up secure networks and clinics across Prague, Budapest, and Warsaw almost overnight. If we prove success there, we'll build a compelling case for a global rollout, and your family will see Medscope's impact beyond any American pilot." Her confidence ignited something in me, the possibility of turning our humble startup into a truly international solution. I reviewed the slides she'd prepared, charts projecting patient engagement in Eastern Europe, cost-benefit analyses for clinics with limited IT staff, proposals for multi-year grants from regional health coalitions. Each slide mapped a path forward. I thought of Nora, who had spent weeks untangling GDPR compliance for our EU pilots, and how this could secure vital partnerships. "This is incredible," I said, voice steady. "But why you? Why go to these lengths?" She paused, choosing her words. "Because once I saw what you'd accomplished, in secret, no less, I realized how much potential you had. Horizon's board is conservative. They see numbers and feasibility. I see the impact on individual lives, and I want to be the bridge that helps them see it too." We spent the next hour refining her pitch deck, discussing compliance checklists, localization strategies, and the travel logistics for on-the-ground beta trials. She proposed starting with a 3-clinic pilot in Warsaw, where she still had colleagues willing to provide feedback and data access, then expanding to a network of rural clinics in the Carpathian foothills, where intermittent internet connectivity made traditional platforms unreliable. Our plan would integrate offline messaging queues and SMS gateways, a technical challenge I relished. By the time we parted ways, the outlines of a transcontinental partnership were etched in my mind, and a draft timeline sprawled in my notebook. That afternoon, I called Nora with the news, pacing our office's tiny balcony as I spoke. She listened, her voice bright with enthusiasm. "This could catapult Medscope into a new league," she said. "And having Alina champion us means we'll have an insider's ear on Horizon's strategy." Her words reinforced my excitement, but I also felt the weight of responsibility. This alliance needed careful management, transparency with our board, and delicate diplomacy between my family and corporate leadership. Yet the potential outweighed the risks. The following week, Alina and I met with Horizon's International Development Committee via video conference. She presented our updated proposal, weaving in strategic insights from her regional experience, while I answered technical questions about scalability, encryption, and multilingual support. When the screen went dark, the lead director reached out to shake my hand, virtually, and said, "Elijah, this is exactly the kind of vision Horizon needs. We'll fund the Polish pilot and assign a dedicated project manager on our end." My relief and pride were palpable. After the call, I forwarded the committee's approval to my mother and father, copying Bennett. I included a note: "Thank you for your support. This chapter builds on the trust you placed in me." Their replies arrived within minutes. My mother wrote, "I'm so proud of you, Elijah. Keep pushing boundaries." My father added, "Remarkable work. Your initiative is inspiring." Bennett chimed in with a thumbs-up emoji. Alina sent a celebratory selfie with her project manager, both grinning under Warsaw skyline backdrops. That evening, as Nora and I toasted with glasses of champagne in our living room, I reflected on how an unexpected ally had changed everything. Beneath the weight of family expectations and corporate pressures, Alina's belief in our mission had forged a path neither of us could have imagined alone. I realized that alliances, whether with siblings, spouses, or former fiancés, could transform isolated efforts into global movements. And as the city lights blinked outside our window, I understood that Medscope's story was no longer confined to hidden basements and hushed family whispers. It was unfolding on an international stage, propelled by the power of a single ally who refused to let our vision remain silent. When the ink dried on the papers finalizing Horizon Systems' minority investment in Medscope, Nora and I found ourselves standing at a crossroads. We had wrested control of our company's destiny, secured resources to expand into new markets, and preserved our founding vision. Yet as I gazed at the skyline beyond our office windows, steel and glass towers reflecting the fading light, I realized that every success carried a cost. Under my breath, I whispered the truth I had long resisted. I was about to leave something behind, and what I built would carry me forward. The day I tendered my resignation from my salaried consulting role at a small IT firm, a role my parents had believed was my real career, felt deceptively ordinary. I walked into the bland cubicle-lined office one last time, offering polite farewells over stale coffee and tattered cubicle walls. My manager, unaware of Medscope's meteoric rise, shook my hand and wished me luck. As I packed up my dusty desk mug and a half-dead succulent into a cardboard box, I wondered how many colleagues had quietly assumed I was simply another tech contractor. I smiled to myself. In truth, I had been architecting something far more consequential beneath their noses. Closing the office door behind me, I felt the final hinge of my old life swing shut. That evening, I unlocked the door to our modest 2-bedroom apartment, where Medscope's early prototypes were still stored in plastic tubs under the bed. Nora greeted me with a small grin, her eyes shining with anticipation. "Well?" she asked, perching on the edge of the mattress. I set the cardboard box down and nodded. "I'm free to focus on Medscope full-time." Relief and excitement flooded her features. In that moment, we weren't just co-founders. We were two people who had chosen to leave familiarity behind to build something that mattered. Our first order of business was establishing a permanent headquarters. The cramped co-working space that had once buzzed with our incubator-level energy no longer sufficed. We needed room for servers, meeting rooms for pilot clinic trainings, and a design nook for our growing UX team. Late nights of apartment wrestling with whiteboards and sticky notes gave way to weekend visits along the city's industrial corridor. We toured bland warehouses and repurposed lofts, finally settling on a light-filled space with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows. The bare concrete floors hummed with promise. As I signed the lease, I pictured fresh rows of desks, a brainstorm room with a writable glass wall, and a demo bay where clinicians could walk through Medscope's workflow in real time. Moving our core team into the new office felt like planting a flag. We spent a weekend hauling modular furniture, assembling monitor stands, and color-coding cable runs. Nora handled the banner announcing our launch party. I wired routers and tested network speeds. By Monday morning, the place buzzed with possibility. Our developers sprawled across desks, their laughter echoing for the first time. The whiteboard no longer fit into a closet. It stretched wall to wall, scrawled with feature timelines, user stories, and post-it notes in every shade of neon. When I walked through those doors each day, I felt the weight of responsibility more acutely, but also a renewed surge of purpose. Meanwhile, my family life transformed in subtle but profound ways. My parents, once awkward in their curiosity, began attending our demo sessions. My mother sat alongside visiting clinic administrators, asking pointed questions about HIPAA compliance and user training. My father, the judge whose patience I had once feared, offered guidance on negotiating partnership agreements and governance bylaws. Bennett, too, became an unexpected ally. He joined me at a healthcare conference, where we co-presented a case study on Medscope's pilot outcomes. Watching him field questions with embarrassment turned pride, I realized we had moved beyond sibling rivalry. We had become collaborators in a shared legacy of impact. As Medscope grew, so did our impact. We rolled out the Eastern Europe pilot in Warsaw, logging late-night calls with clinic managers and translating user guides into Polish and Hungarian. Nurses who once struggled with clunky messaging platforms praised the simplicity of our interface. Doctors praised the AI triage assistant for flagging critical cases before they escalated. When Horizon's board reviewed the pilot metrics, readmission rates down by 50%, patient satisfaction soaring, they greenlit broader regional expansion. In that moment, I felt a deep satisfaction, not for the figures, but for the lives improved by timely communication and seamless care coordination. Yet growth demanded that I leave behind some of the hands-on work I had once cherished. My role shifted from code commits to board meetings, from debugging server logs to strategizing partnerships. I traded late-night sprints in the server room for early morning calls with investors across time zones. There were days I missed the tactile thrill of assembling circuit boards, of watching a prototype pulse to life under my fingertips. But I reminded myself that leadership meant empowering others to build, to own the meticulous details I once stewarded alone. On the first anniversary of signing with Horizon, Nora and I hosted a rooftop celebration at our office. Strings of lights crisscrossed above, and a panorama of city lights stretched to the horizon. We toasted to our journey, from secret basement experiments to global deployments. Many faces raised glasses that night, developers who had joined mid-sprint, clinicians whose endorsements had opened new markets, Horizon executives turned partners. My parents and Bennett stood among the crowd, their smiles wide and proud. I realized that what I left behind, uncertainty, hidden ambitions, solitary coding sessions, had cultivated the foundation I needed to build something far greater. In the quiet after the last guest departed, Nora and I stood at the rooftop edge, the night's breeze carrying the distant hum of traffic. The city lights blinked like lines of code on a vast monitor. She slipped her hand into mine and said, "Look what you built." I turned to her, heart full. "We built," I corrected, "and we'll keep building." As I gazed at the horizon, I understood that my story was defined not by what I left behind, but by the space I created to shape the future. One line of code, one partnership, one life improved at a time.